Another fan favourite episode among fans is Percy Takes the Plunge, the 11th episode of the second series based on the story of the same name from the Railway series book, The 8 Famous Engines. After taking a short break from Percy's stories, this one shows Percy again in full force. At Brendam, a tired Henry is looking to rest. However, he is annoyed to find Percy telling Bill and Ben about the time he had braved bad weather to help Thomas's passengers return home. Percy claims that water's nothing to an engine with determination, while the twins shower him with praise. Henry arrives and angrily sends them away, claiming that the shed is only for engines belonging to the Fat Controller and calls them silly. Percy is furious at him because he was enjoying telling Bill and Ben his story. Henry also thinks Percy is also silly for his remark about water. Percy runs off, sinning about the time Henry refused to leave the tunnel in case the rain spoiled his paint, to Henry's annoyance as he huffs to himself that no one will ever let him forget that incident. Percy finds Thomas looking at a danger board on the quayside. Thomas tells Percy that they must not go past it, recalling when he passed it and fell down a mine. What Percy doesn't realise is that the foundations of the quay had sunk, causing the tracks to slope downward into the sea. As a result, Percy, who is now feeling very cheeky, remarks that the board is stupid and makes a plan to pass it. One day, Percy is taking a line of trucks to the harbour. He secretly asks them to give him a bump once they get to the quay. The trucks happily agree, having never been asked to bump an engine before. Percy thinks that he can stop the trucks whenever he likes, but every wise engine knows that you cannot trust trucks. At the quay, Percy stops before the board, convinced his plan will work. But the truck sees the opportunity and bump Percy hard enough to knock his crew off the footplate. Percy is frantic and urges the trucks to stop, but they ignore him and cause him to slide downward into the sea. The Fat Controller arrives on the boat and disciplines Percy for his deliberate recklessness and disobedience. Percy begs to be get out, but the Fat Controller informs him that it cannot be done until high tide, and hopes that it will teach Percy to obey orders and listen. When night falls, floating cranes are brought in to hoist Percy from the sea onto a flatbed, as he has become too cold, filthy and stiff to move. The next morning, Percy is arranged to be taken to the works for cleaning and mending on Henry's goods train. Henry finds the incident very amusing, telling Percy that he needs more determination and suggesting that he would like it better next time. Percy, however, is determined that there will not be a next time. This episode for some reason takes place before Percy Takes the Plunge, which wouldn't be adapted until the third series of the TV series. So when you watch this episode as a grown-up, it feels kind of odd watching this episode even though we haven't seen the events of Percy Takes the Plunge just yet. And I did mention in my review of Thomas, Percy and Nicole that Percy's Promise was actually intended to be adapted for the series, but then they cancelled it at the last minute. It was probably due to the fact that they didn't really have the technology to put an engine fully in water just yet. Obviously they could handle the front end of an engine being going in water without damaging it. They must not have had the budget to have water damaged an engine just to rebuild it later on. So they had to save it till the third series. But we'll cover that episode when we get to it next year. The other major difference from the Railway series story, aside from skipping Percy's Promise, is that in the original story, Percy tells his story to a group of unnamed friends from the other railway. Whereas in the episode, Bill and Ben take their place due to the impracticality and high cost of constructing several single-use engines. And that really does make sense, since the team would want to spend the money on characters that they're going to use again rather than one-off characters that we'll never see again. And as I mentioned earlier, it wasn't in the budget. And I love the continuity that this episode brings, since it reminds us of the events of Down the Mine, since Thomas recalls it from looking at the danger sign at the quay, which is the exact same sign that was used in Down the Mine. And the events of the episode were mentioned by the narrator in the special Tale of the Brave, by Percy in Big World Big Adventures during the song Where in the World is Thomas, and by James in the 23rd series episode Chuckle-Some Trucks, with CGI recreations of the scene where Percy plunges into the water. It's just really nice that this episode has continuity for the first series, and it continues to be mentioned throughout the TV series years later. And if you look very carefully in this scene, you'll be able to find a character that wouldn't be properly introduced until the next episode. And this episode was also the first for the Troublesome Trucks to take centre stage in Series 2, causing a derailment of an engine. Except this time they were asked to do it. And of course you can't blame the trucks for the accident because Percy should have known better than to trust them. Since most engines on Sodor know how troublesome trucks can be, Percy obviously wasn't to know since he'd never seen their cheeky side before this episode. So in a way, the episode teaches kids to be careful who you trust. It's a really nice lesson to teach kids, and it's really awesome to see a huge harbour set in the second series. In the first series we did get to see a harbour, but it was just a small set. But here we get to see lots of boats, so much water, and a lot of machinery around the place. This has to be the most industrial scene for the second series, and we continue to see big harbours for years to come after this episode. Percy Takes the Plunge is another one of those iconic episodes that most Thomas fans remember throughout the years, and it's definitely worth a watch if you haven't seen it for a while. You'll enjoy seeing Percy's accident, you'll get a kick out of seeing a huge harbour set, and it's just an all-around fun episode that gives us continuity from the first series. Give it a watch.